welcome to you all to our first Cultural Thursday of the spring semester. I'm Tracy Kleckel Jimenez. I'm the coordinator and also a Spanish instructor here at the college. Just to note, we had something in the West Bank Journal about this semester's Cultural Thursdays. The April Cultural Thursday is on the second Thursday of the month, and it's Helena Danielson, not Davidson. That was totally my mistake. Today, to recognize and honor Black History Month, Central Lakes College Cultural Thursdays program and the Office of Equity and Inclusion are hosting Bukata Hayes. We were so impressed with him. He was here last year that we would just like to hire him and keep him on campus. He's the executive director of the Greater Mankato Diversity Council and has been for a long time. He will discuss the concept of love and struggle as the motivation for the movement for equality, civil rights, and justice, both in the past and in our current day. Please welcome me in joining Bukata.
All right. Good afternoon. So just want to appreciate and thank Tracy for an opportunity again to address Central Lakes College, its staff, its students, community members who might be here. And just as we begin our conversation today, last year when I was here, I talked about the moral arc, and that it's long, but it bends toward justice. So, of course, the quote from Dr. Martin Luther King when talking about the civil rights struggle and how we, in essence, have to keep the faith. That yes, it may look bleak, that yes, it may be tough and difficult, but the arc bends towards justice. So what I talked about last time and what I'll share today is that it doesn't just happen because it happens. I think Dr. King was stressing that we work, right, to bend that arc. We do work, we work in our spaces within our colleges, our campuses, our communities, our neighborhoods, our places of business to ensure, right, that we are working towards justice. And in Dr. King's time, you can understand why that was an intentional matter. And I think also in our time, we can continue to look around and see reasons why we have to be intentional about that. And so I used this quote last time, which also I think is important for us to understand that progress doesn't just happen. If we were to take Frederick Douglass's quote, he says that if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom, yet depreciate agitation, are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both, moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. So again, Frederick Douglass was a slave, freed, right? He was once a slave, freed, and he was working to free others. And so his point was that there's difficult times ahead, that we can't simply say this is what we desire to be without doing the work that follows that. And that work is tough. I'm not a farmer, so I don't fully understand the plowing up the ground to get crops, but I understand that there's a process, right? That you have to do that, plant the seed, water, take care of it, and then you see results. He's asking us to do the same thing. As we work within communities, that we do the hard work, that we stay steady to the goal, and then we work for those results. And so that's where the concept that I'll introduce, and I got it from my father, and so I'll reference him a few times, but the concept of love and struggle. Love and struggle. And this was a greeting, a saying that he and other kind of pro-black civil rights leaders use when greeting each other or departing each other's company as a way to talk about continuing to be in the struggle. But first, to begin from a foundation of love. That love was that foundation that we began from. And so he says it like this. We say love and struggle, and that's his picture down there. I'm trying to get my Frederick Douglass like that, but as you get older, your hair doesn't grow as good as you would like. So, but he said, we say love and struggle because love is the bedrock for progress and the motivation for the struggle. Without love, struggle loses its raison d'etre, which means its most important reason for being is French, forfeits its redeeming quality, severs its connection to the suffering of the real people we are struggling side by side with and fighting for. So love and struggle, right? Love for our people and all people, right? Love for our and all of our progress. So as we celebrate Black History Month, one of the things that we have to continually do is not simply talk about the ways in which we may have fell short, or ways in which society did not see us as whole and complete and part of it. But we must also celebrate the ways in which we took on our own agency and autonomy to make it real for us. And that's what we saw happen within the civil rights movement, is we took our own agency to make it real, to make progress real for us, and then we continue to work for prosperity, meaning this long-term opportunities, chances for us to be our best. That's what love means. And so I want to say that because the civil rights movement and some elements of the civil rights movement often get characterized as beginning in anger, possibly frustration, but most importantly and most critically, it began from love. Love for all of us as human beings, love for us as equals, to be treated as equals, a compassion for all of our situations, and really simply wanting to be seen as valued members of a community, right? And so here are a few folks that I think exemplify that love as we talk about Black History Month. So Harriet Tubman, I don't know if you've seen the movie, I would say see the movie, right? The idea of Harriet Tubman and love for her people had her take folks to safety and return numerous times into really the belly of the beast to free others. That was love and struggle. I'm beginning from this profound place of love and caring and compassion, and I am willing to struggle, to do the hard work, to make it real, not just for me, but for others. We also can talk about Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, Booker T. Washington, Martin Luther King, also Malcolm X. And I have two things I want to quickly take a little bit of a tangent on, and that is, as we talk about love, it's manifested in some ways that seem appropriate to society, in some ways that seem inappropriate or not right to society, right? So some folks, when talking about, let's say, a person like Marcus Garvey, with his kind of return to Africa movement, saw him as inappropriate, saw him as an agitator. They also saw Martin Luther King Jr. as an agitator. If you remember the polling of America about Martin Luther King back while he was alive, that's changed, but they also saw him as an agitator. They saw Marcus Garvey as someone who didn't like all people, right? When really he was saying, I have a profound love for my people and our situation. I believe this is the way we should get to that. And so let me give you just a quick, what I would term as the duality of love and struggle, right? The duality of love and struggle that exists in all the work that we do. We may have different avenues we believe we need to take to get there. So two historical examples I'll share with you quickly. Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. So if you know these two very smart men, right? W.E.B. Probably considered himself the smartest dude alive. if you read anything about him, he was pretty confident in his abilities and in his knowledge. Graduated from Harvard and started and was part of the founding of the NAACP and some other things. Also had the concept of the talented tenth, meaning that there are some of us who are so talented that we need to be in front and we need to be leading. And then there was Booker T. Washington, who was basically saying, hey, we need to be carpenters. We need to be tradespeople. We need to be those who use our hands to build our situation. Booker T. founded Tuskegee University as a teacher training school, right? Understanding we need folks to teach. He was saying, here's a way that we could do it. He founded Tuskegee University to teach teachers and to train them for going into our communities to teach students. But if you don't know, I would encourage you to do a little research, because these two had kind of a war of words about how we reach liberation, right? Both had immense love for our community, for Black people. One thought we should educate ourselves and in some ways be separate and build our own. And another thought we should integrate, use our hands to continue to build a community. And it was a fierce kind of war of words. right? And between those two, again, highly successful, both had people who followed them, but they thought about it two different ways. And I think too often, we believe we have to choose one. So one of the things I want to say about the duality of love and struggle is that it takes both. That it absolutely takes both. That not one single way is a way for liberation. It takes both. It took both us using our hands, going into trades, building, training teachers, and trying to educate ourselves at the highest level possible to be a talented 10th, to lead our communities, and maybe even create separate things of our own, as W.E.B. Du Bois would have called for. But we needed both. And another example of that is these two gentlemen, right? We more know about these two gentlemen, right? And the different approaches that they took and how a society saw that, right, during their time, and often tried to pit them against each other, right? Both would get questions about, so what do you think about, if it was Malcolm X, he would get questions. And in the beginning, he answered them pretty tersely, honestly, right? When asked about Dr. King, he called him a whole host of names that were not flattering because he felt like Dr. King was being too much of a pacifist, that he was letting our people get beat upside the head and water hoses turned on them and dogs that were biting them. And he was like, no way. Like he had a term that many may know, by any means necessary. And he was saying, we protect ourselves. No, I'm not going to let someone hit me upside the head. That was Malcolm X, right? And so, again, I think in this particular example, both were needed. Both were crucial. Because far too many times, folks only saw Martin Luther King Jr. as the leader that we wanted to engage with, and Malcolm X as the one that we need to resist and ignore. And I would say the power of the duality, one, it does present an alternative, right? So as we look to kind of better our circumstance, there is always the alternative. So for these two gentlemen, we could do it in a way that we work through legislation, we work through peaceful means, we work through nonviolent means, Dr. Martin Luther King. And then there was Malcolm X, who said, I am willing to protect my people by any means necessary. And yes, for him, that meant if I had to bear arms for protection, I was going to bear arms for protection. And my people were, right? The evolution of these two is important too, because Dr. King, with his sword and rhetoric, also, if you read the letter from Birmingham jail, also began to question a little bit. Like, am I doing the right thing? Like, did I bring my people into a burning house? Was I real? And Malcolm X, after his trip to Mecca, as he was a Muslim, after his trip to Mecca, came back and said, I'm willing to work with anybody who wants to work for our liberation. Which many folks don't understand or refuse to acknowledge about Malcolm X is that he made this transformation that now he said, I'm open to work with anyone, right? Before that, he didn't say that. But after his trip to Mecca, he said, I'm willing to work with anyone who's willing to work with me, be by my side as we work towards liberation. That duality is important. Again, I'm asking us not to choose one or the other, because that's oftentimes what we are pitted to do. You got to pick one way or the other. I'm telling you, and I'm encouraging you, that with the notion of love and struggle, it means we utilize many, many ways to have our agency and our autonomy be recognized and seen. And so there's a host of other folks too that'll, James Baldwin, Fannie Lou Hamer, Maya Angelou, Huey P. Newton, Rosa Parks, Stokely Carmichael, Muhammad Ali, Francis Cress Welsing, the Black Panther Party. Again, all from this profound place of love, right? That we are going to work to make this happen. And some that were deemed controversial in their time, such as the Black Panther Party, right? What folks don't remember about the Black Panther Party, one is they were basically the precursor to lunch and breakfast in schools. They did the first free breakfast program in the country when they were founded in Oakland, providing free meals to a community who needed it. That was born out of the Black Panther Party. And the other thing that they did, for those who are believe in your right to defend yourself, they also said, hey, we want protection from police brutality. And they said, we're willing to patrol our own neighborhoods to make sure that we're good and we can handle that, and to stop what, if you read now, was commonplace, and that was brutality against black folks from police within their communities. And again, some of that was deep controversial. Why would you be arming yourself to protect yourself against folks who are sent there to help you, right? Their experience was that it was not help. And so that's one of the ways, again, you can look through the rest of those. Huey P. Newton was a founder of the Black Panther Party. Stokely Carmichael was the founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which at the time with Dr. King was a student-led, student-centered, basically movement to desegregate the South, right? Stokely Carmichael became their most vocal leader, most visible leader. Maya Angelou, she's just Maya Angelou, right? For folks who know her. She has a line that I use many times, and it basically says, when you see me, she's talking about herself and her being a black woman and all of that brings with it. When you see me, it ought to make you proud, right? When you see me, it ought to make you proud. And she was saying that from this humanity standpoint, right? The same author who wrote Still I Rise was saying, when you see me, you ought to be proud. Meaning, like, she had pulled herself there. She had done the struggle to be where she was at, to succeed, and we all can take some measure of pride in her doing that. And so the struggle part, so the love part is what we, like, this immense care, this immense compassion, this profound love for our people, for each other. So as we look around this auditorium, love and struggle does not exclude anyone. I want you to be really, really certain of that. Love and struggle is all of us. Like, we care for one another. We care what outcomes for one another are. We work to partner with each other to make sure outcomes are fair, equitable for each other. The struggle part is the work we do for that. So one, the struggle is the individual actions. What do you do each day? Right? What do you do each day, right, in the name of progress, in the name of community, in the name of cohesion and collective sort of prosperity? What do you do? Who are you talking with? What initiatives are you leading? How are you partnering with others when you see a need within community to answer? The individual actions. And then there's also the coordinated initiatives. So one of those coordinating initiatives could be the Cultural Thursdays. To say, hey, we're going to do some specific things to invite folks to campus to engage, and we're going to continue to make that available. It also could be such things as TRIO, Upward Bound, right? And the next one too could be that as well. It also could be certain initiatives that you may take. I'll talk about an initiative that we undertook in Mankato from 2016 to 2018 called Right on Race. And it was an intentional deep dive effort with our community about race and racism and its impacts upon us as a nation, but also us as a community. Those are those coordinated initiatives where we partner with each other. Our individual actions lead us to connections and relationships with each other, and in those connections and relationships, we work together to bring about collective responsibility, and then those change institutions. And so those may be organizations like the NAACP, which, for those who don't know, or for those who know, and just this serves as a reminder, the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was founded with about 70% white folks, right? So I think many times folks believe that, like, it was, no, we've always partnered across lines of race and gender and other ways to bring about progress. The NAACP, at the time of its founding, was the founders were 70% white. And so I always like to bring that up because I think sometimes folks think that we can't partner for folks of color success. We can. And folks of color would love for white community members to partner. We're just simply asking you to partner. We're asking you to partner. Be by our side. Walk through the fire with us when that fire comes, and not lead, or not take over, or co-opt. Then the NAACP is a great example of that, right? In which we partnered together. It was not 100% folks of color who started it. It was 70% white, 30% folks of color. And they had some heavy hitters on there like W.E.B. Du Bois, who said, we can partner for this common goal. That's a change institution. And then the other thing I would ask is, where are those change institutions today? So as we look around our communities, as we look around our nation, what would we consider to be those change institutions today that are struggling to make sure that we are seeing all of us as equal and whole? Are you a part of them? Are you supporting them? Are your individual actions and your coordinated initiatives with others leading to some of those same ends that those change institutions are working for as well? That becomes part of what we have to continue to talk about. So some of that in the past, right? The Montgomery bus boycott, NAACP, the free breakfast program, the March on Washington, sit-ins at counters. And so I know many folks have seen photos, but I would like you to go back and look again and think about a courage infused with love that would allow you to sit there and be abused, basically. To willingly put yourself at that counter, to sit there understanding what the reaction would be. Like me personally, because of the time that I've grown up in, I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I hope deep down that I would have been able to, but that is some power that I don't know if I've seen or encountered or that I naturally have within me. And I would ask that about all of us. Would we be willing, with a courage infused with love, to go sit at a counter where you know you are not welcome and simply sit and take fists and kicks and food poured over your head with no reaction? With no reaction, with no reprisals. You're simply doing that to try and bring to light unfairness. I think that becomes a really important piece for us in our day as we continue to engage with other things that we see are unfair, unequal, and need to be changed. There was the Freedom Riders, the Voting Rights Act, armed protection again by the Black Panther Party, Southern Christian Leadership Conference that was started by Dr. Martin Luther King and also Dr. Ralph Abernathy as a change institution to work on behalf of Southern blacks as they tried to move forward. And then I told you about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And so part of what I would like to do now is those past efforts is let you know about a really very little known change institution effort that my father was a part of, that I'm doing a little research on, and I want to share a little bit of that research with you. So my father, through love and struggle, the love had him leave the Navy. He had been in the Navy for a couple of years. He said he read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and that changed his life. He said, I need to go be with the people. Being part of the struggle, he left the Navy, eventually came to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He created numerous organizations and initiatives born out of this immense love for his people. He started what was called the Red, Black, and Green House. He was, it was called the United Black Community Council, in which they started to organize the black community in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to be more aware of their rights, more aware of statutes and policies that impacted their existence in that city. He also started a basketball league, right? Understanding an outlet for young folks. It started simply as him and some friends going to playgrounds saying, hey, would you like to be a part of a team? Here's some t-shirts. We're going to go over and travel and play at another playground. It soon became the third, basically, most known and largest summer basketball league in the country, behind the Rucker, which is in New York, and the Drew League in Los Angeles. It's called the Warning League in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And it was warning. And on the t-shirts it said, we must respect each other. Right? So even in that outlet, that activity, embedded in that was this kind of community and collective that we are here for each other. And so that organization, it was called the Black Topographical Center. It was a short-lived organization from 1968 to 1985. And topographical meant both in terms of people and also land, right? So I'll explain a little bit more about that. But it was a grassroots educational organization. Didn't have PhDs leading it. What they had was people who were committed to the advancement of people within their community, black people within their community, and they were willing to go do research, learn, and then teach. That's really what it was. That's how he got involved with it. Again, the topography, so not just the land, right, but the people who inhabit that land. And so one of the things that they did was they basically took what now we would call the Demography Center, basically, and they mapped out where black folks were within the continental United States, right? In Chicago, San Francisco, Milwaukee, Los Angeles, Newark, other places, and simply tried to give us a better idea of the amount of people we were talking about who were being disenfranchised from kind of this full, robust citizenship of our country, right? So they mapped that out. They gave tours to folks who wanted to learn more about it. They also talked about economically how that disenfranchisement impacted black folks within communities across our urban areas. And then that economic analysis of the condition of black people began and was the root for many of the efforts that they put forward in saying, we can document where people are, we can document the disadvantage or disparities that exist where people are, and now let's do some things about it. The United Black Community Council, the Red, Black, and Green House in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, was part of what was born out of this understanding, right? That we have to do something, that we have to struggle to try and change the existence. So this was one way. This was born or created or founded in the same year that the Black Panther Party was founded in Oakland, California, 1968. Same years, of course, in which Bobby Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King were assassinated as well. Black Panther Party was one way of doing that. This was an alternative. Education, information, provide that to people. Lift people up through knowing that there is another way. This one was again, little known, not the same sort of publicity as the Black Panther Party. And so the lesson I take from that is whatever work you do it because you are invested in it. It may not get the same sort of notoriety as someone else who may be 2 seats away from you in this space. But the work is your work is no less important. Theirs is no more important than yours. That we both have to commit to struggling to make it real, to make it tangible. So for the Black Topographical Center to be able to say, hey, look, there are thousands and thousands of other black people in this community who are experiencing some of the same things, it took away this notion that it was only me or it was only my neighborhood. They said, no, there's some systemic issues that we have to address. And I think that's an important thing too. I think because of how our societies are constructed, we oftentimes place systemic outcomes on individual actions. And that's just simply not the case. If we think about our K through 12 educational system, we have an achievement gap. How many of us know that we have an achievement gap in K through 12 between white students and non-white students? Does anybody know the graduation rate for black students? as a guess, ballpark, in the state of Minnesota, in our K through 12 system?
877.
What'd you say?
80.
80, okay.
About 60.
60.
40.
So I said
40. 77.
40, okay? So it's about 49%. Black students on a whole graduate from high school at about a 49% clip as a state. Anybody take a guess on what the number is for Native students, indigenous students? 40?
30.
So about 45, 46%. And then if we take Latino students, think it's around the same 50% mark? Yeah, it's about 50%. The graduation rate, the graduation, the graduation rate for like all students is around 84, 85% for us as a state. And then when we disaggregate the data and we see that those are the graduation rates for Black, Native, and Latino students, again, I would say we oftentimes are putting individual actions upon students based on systemic outcomes. There's just no way that 50% of students simply don't that's just not the case. There's some systemic issues that we have to deal with to understand that. So for instance, if in this state we found out that women graduated at less than 50% and men graduated at 80 some odd percent, would we believe it was all the inherent abilities of women? No.
They are dumber. No?
I'm not. No, they're not. Like you almost got all of us up in here, man. We wouldn't believe it was the inherent ability, right? We would say there's something else that has to be wrong there. I think we aren't saying that enough as we see graduation rates of less than 50% for Black, Native, and Latino students. I think we are, at times, a majority of the time, saying it must be something wrong with students, instead of examining our systems, right? And that's what the Black Topographical Center, was trying to embed within our conversations, is that it's not solely individuals, that it is systems in place that are creating outcomes for Black folks within these communities vis-a-vis their white counterparts. That is important knowledge. That is critical knowledge. A matter of fact, I want to read to you one of the quotes that basically was the kind of ethos, the motto of the organization, and it is this. And it was based off of doing this analysis, doing this research, providing data to folks, documentation. The quote was, it is a rare exposure of knowledge that can change the way we think by revealing the truth of which we were unaware. From here, we can move to new horizons heretofore unimaginable. That was the purpose of the Black Topographical Center, is to provide this knowledge that maybe we were unaware of, and with that knowledge, move to places that we couldn't even dream of before. And with that, it spread out to places all over the country. Again, places such as Chicago, Los Angeles, Newark, New York, San Francisco, all over the country, basically. Trying to do this demographic data, because at that time in 1968, that demographic data was incomplete for Black folks within our nation. Right? It didn't tell the full story, so the Black Topographical Center was a way of trying to tell that full story. Also, in today's iterations, again, some may seem controversial, but I think in the essence of Black autonomy and agency. Organizations like Black Lives Matter are trying to work for that, so that folks understand autonomy and agency. And so I know the question often comes, well, what about other lives? And they're not saying other lives don't matter. What they're saying is much what the Black Topographical Center was documenting, and that is from data, from experience, from what I see and what we see in communities across our country. It seems as though if we were to take a look at education, we're to take a look at incarceration, we're to take a look at health outcomes. As a side note, there's new research that says like stress leads to health like detriments. Stress can impact high blood pressure, heart disease, mental health issues. And then a study quickly showed that racism, one of the more stressful things an individual can go through, also led to high blood pressure, also led to heart disease, also led to mental health issues. And so in health, in wealth, income, like there's a study that showed that I believe white Minnesotans had almost like 200 times the net worth of Black Minnesotans. So Black Topographical Center was saying, as we do this research, again, let's not ascribe systemic outcomes to individuals, right? Because it's a system. And if we were to take a look at all that, and someone placed that in front of you, and let's change it, and let's say it was women, or it was Lutherans, or it was whatever, would we believe that we as a society thought those folks were valued? Would we believe that we thought those folks were equal parts of our community? If at every data point systems showed they weren't. If at every data point we saw something contrary to, yes, we all belong together in this collective human family, Black Lives Matter would become part of what we would ask the question about. And we also see that in other things, right? Voting rights and restorations. So recently, Florida, if you followed this, restored the right to vote for felons who had worked their way out of parole and probation, fulfilled their duties, paid their debt to society. And then shortly after that, Florida said, well, you have to pay back everything you owe before you can. Right? And so part of all of these things, voting rights, criminal justice reform, we see that with both the current president and also the past president, that they started to do things around sentencing reform and other issues, understanding that we are on an unsustainable path if we talk about mass incarceration, criminal justice, and what that does to communities across our country. Right? So now they're starting to do some things. Critical race theory, trauma-informed treatment. So some folks may understand or have heard of that term before, but trauma-informed treatment simply says that we acknowledge that things have happened that have impacted that person physically, mentally, emotionally, and that is part of the reason why we may be seeing some things that we see. And so let's understand that, and then let's engage with folks from that understanding that these things have happened. And then confronting white privilege and white supremacy. I'll mention the effort we did in 2016 to 2018. And before that effort, white privilege, white supremacy was mentioned on TV maybe once every 2 years or something, as you heard CNN or MSNBC or Fox. But during that time, because of what we saw in Charlottesville, I think that's the other thing that we have to acknowledge, is some of these things are simply things that we have refused to talk about, engage in, struggle with, as Frederick Douglass would have encouraged us to do. And so we had in 2017 a rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, that most described, and I say most because there were some who didn't, but most described as a white supremacist, right, rally. That's 2017. it means we still have to struggle to make sure that we are creating societies that we all are included within. And so, two things I'll say, because we do have some time for questions here, or just comments or to engage. But two things I'll leave you with, at least from us as a council. We do what's called the Promoting Respect workshops, which is, for me, the essence of love and struggle. We have a deep compassion and care for our young folks, all of them, and we're working within schools to make sure that they are the primary folks who are creating and crafting communities of inclusion within their schools. So the Promoting Respect workshops, the 86 and 83, quickly. We had our first class of students who experienced all K through 12, all 13 curriculums within that Promoting Respect workshops curriculum. We asked them kind of a senior survey and said, hey, we asked them 5 questions. The 86 and 83 speak to 2 questions. One was, did the Promoting Respect workshops help you understand how diverse your community is and that we can respect each other despite differences? 86% of the students said yes. I now understand, I now know how diverse my community is and that we can respect each other despite differences. Like they can put it into practice. And then the 83%, we also asked them basically how they are applying that. So we asked a question that got to that, and that was, the statement was, I intervened at least once when I saw a bullying or discrimination incident happen in my classroom or hallway. And 83% of the students said yes. At least one time I intervened when I saw a classmate being picked on. At least one time I intervened when I saw someone doing something to somebody else that was discriminatory or bullying. That's love and struggle. That's believing so much that we would invest 13 years to see if this is the outcome. Are we helping students understand diversity within their community? Because those will be the leaders of our organizations and our institutions. The Promoting Respect workshops don't say that we all have to think the same. Matter of fact, in the first question it said, despite our differences. Right? Which becomes important. The next one was Right on Race. That was 2016 to 2018, and it was a deep dive into race and racism and its impacts upon our community. And really the effort started with a question and then kind of a couple of follow-up questions. And so I want you to think about that here at Central Lakes, here on this campus, in this community. And the question was, if a racial incident happened in your community, right? So we posed that to ourselves. If a racial incident happened in our community, and then the 2 follow-up questions. 1, would you be proud of how your community was being presented on the nightly news, in the newspaper, national TV in response to that racial incident? Would you be proud of that response? And then the other was, if you don't know what your community's response will be, then it means we need to do work. It means we need to get started. Because either if I'm not proud or if I actually don't know, both of those are not good outcomes for if a racial incident occurred within your community. And I think what we're starting to see is that it's not if in some of our communities, but it is when. And so part of it is, this was a 2-year effort. We examined many different facets around race to kind of prepare our community to be able to respond and to be able to advocate, prevent, and or respond to an incident that happened within our community. And so as I end, again, the moral arc from injustice to justice. And these pictures I shared with you last year, but again, I want to reiterate, it is not that it just happens. It is that we have to work. We have to be committed to love and struggle. And in particular, that struggle part, which could be the discomfort, which could be the difficult part, we have to be committed to that to help that arc continue to bend towards justice. And I think that's what I will leave you with, is I encourage you on this campus, I encourage you in your community to love, have deep compassion and care for each other, and then to struggle to make sure that the things that we do within community reinforce, reassure, amplify that deep care and love and compassion that we have for one another as well. And I would say that's what has happened through history in terms of Black history, in terms of gaining autonomy, gaining agency, to make sure that love and struggle was tangible, was palpable for Black community within the United States of America. Thank you.
So we have some time for questions. I've got a couple of mics here, so if someone wants to run with me, turn the other mic on and get started. I think you should exercise. Yeah, that's right.
This inequity, graduation inequity's been around for a long time, and the government's tried different things to improve it. What's something that you would suggest that hasn't already been tried that would improve that situation?
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll say to that. One is I think we are now starting to examine and try and understand more closely notions around implicit bias and how we see each other, right? Because how we see each other impacts how we interpret what each other does, right? So I think we've seen a really honing in on that. And so if I could just give a quick example of what that looks like, right? So, and how it shows up. So when me and my wife go to the hardware store, 97% of the time, person working with us talks to me first. Why do you think they talk to me first?
Because you're the man.
Because I'm the man. What are the notions and narratives about men in our society? What are they? We fix stuff. We know what tools are. Like, we've done it before, right? So in that instance, me and my wife have not opened our mouths, but I'm assigned, because I simply look the way I do, I'm assigned instant credibility, knowledge, expertise, competence, and at the same time, my wife is not assigned that same level of expertise, competence, experience, right? Implicit bias is that, right? That there are these things that we do and we engage in that impacts how we see each other. And so maybe that's why we see discipline data within schools that is that we have disparities, white students vis-a-vis students of color. And if those discipline disparities are there, then maybe that's part of why we're getting graduation rates that are also have disparate outcomes. But part of that is how are we working with the folks in front of those students so that they understand what they bring to each situation. So many of us carry with us the notion that being a man gives me something in that environment. Same way in which being a young Black boy, being a young Latina, being an indigenous boy or girl carries something into that space. That we have these notions about capability, competence, right, of those young people vis-a-vis their white counterparts. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I think, quickly, is just that I think we have to be willing to fund and I'll say do school differently. As long as we keep the same system and structure that we're continually get the disparities from and not change how that looks and operates, then we really aren't, we really aren't truly invested in changing those outcomes, right? Because we have to move the system in another way if we are looking to truly decrease disparities around education. And so I would say those are two things. And so the one around how can we do that, I think that's a much larger conversation, one around property taxes and how we fund schools, and is that even viable? And then two, like when does school happen? And how is school arranged over a calendar year, right? And so I think those are some things that we can speak to in terms of how to change that. I mean, there are some programs out there that are having some results, but not the results that I think we want to see.
when we look at mass incarcerations, I grew up in the inner city of Minneapolis in the 90s, you know, and
Yep.
so the crack epidemic.
Absolutely.
You look at the mass incarcerations, you have, all these fathers who
Yes.
incarcerated.
Yes.
Now you have these kids
Yes.
who are in their 20s now, and their fathers are just getting out of prison. There is an emotional gap between father and son. You've broken that bond. You have all these kids now who have no, in reality, have no aspect of being a father or what it takes to, show emotion. And now, what about all these kids? There's no support there whatsoever for these kids. It's kind of like, it's just cycle repeats. It's just a big circle. Those kids are going to end up in the criminal justice system. So I mean,
Absolutely.
something in a way has to be addressed on that end too as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think for most of us in this space, we would acknowledge that it is important to have role models, right? And when you talk about the crack epidemic, men were disproportionately taken out of black and brown homes, and so thus no real role models there, right? So, and again, the system that made that possible, let's talk about it, right? The sentencing guidelines for if you had 5 ounces of hard, which was called crack, or powder, which was powder cocaine. 500 ounces, right, or grams of powder cocaine got you less than, right, 5 ounces of hard crack cocaine. So let's think about who would be using that, right? If we look at data, it was pretty clear where we found crack cocaine and where we found large amounts of powder cocaine. Both are wrong. We're not saying either is right or wrong. Both are wrong, but both were punished very differently, right? And that's part of a system, right? Really that almost with clear precision kind of swept through certain communities, and other communities were spared from losing male role models within community, right? And so absolutely kind of mass incarceration and criminal justice reform we have to think about, right? While we're on that, let's think about the regulation of marijuana and how many black and brown folks are currently in prison because of either using or distributing marijuana. And now it is legal in states, some states, Illinois is one state who is trying to address that, but most states have not gone back to say, well, if we're legalizing it now, right, what are we doing with the impact we had on communities based on what we now say is okay, right? That's another issue, and it has a racial lens to it that we have to be willing to speak to. And then the last thing I'll say about that, because we are going through another epidemic right now, and it's the opioid epidemic. And the majority of opioid users are white. And I want you to think about what has transpired because that is the case. The narratives about, what is that? Treatment. The narrative around what we need to do with crack cocaine, and particularly being black and brown, was we need to criminalize, we need to punish, we need to jail, we need to be really, really tough on crime. And with the opioid epidemic, it's been treatment. How do we get help? And matter of fact, let's go sue the folks and jail the folks who make opioids. I want you to think about the difference in response there. Now, could it be that we have learned as a community around treatment and around going to get folks who are part of the pipeline for these things? Or could it be that the racial dynamics of who was using has impacted how we view the solution we apply to those situations? I think that's a question that we have to be honest about, and we have to try and answer, because there is a difference. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Any other questions? We have a question back here.
In Minnesota,
I think there's a mic coming for you.
oh, okay. I'm not sure but this last month, did Minnesota find some law, some slavery law, or they were gonna get rid of, or trying to get rid of the legislative? They had to go through the legislature. It was a law from, I don't know, 100-some years ago.
What
But
was
they
it
still
pertaining
have-
to? I'm sorry.
I thought it was either slavery or indentured servitude or something. Just in the last month,
Okay.
wasn't it, in the paper, that it went through, it was either, it had to do with, I don't think it would have with black slavery, but
Okay.
it could be, it's something to do with, slavery or something.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go research it. I apologize because I have not heard about it.
Within the last week.
Okay, last 2 weeks, the
Yeah.
one that I know, at least coming from the governor's office, was around racial language in housing codes and how they were removing that from those housing codes to impact how communities were. But I'm gonna go look for that. Thank you.
Minnesota's known, they had a lot of black, they had a lot of southern people coming up here
Yep.
in the 1800s, building
Absolutely.
stuff, and they had black slaves coming up here with them.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna go look for that. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yes. Anybody else? Well, if I can leave you with one more quote, and this is simply what I believe we have to continue to do in terms of knowledge and what that gives us, and the importance of kind of continuing in the struggle. And that quote is, a collection of the proper knowledge for the proper purpose is an incalculable and powerful assortment of assets with no force too mighty to conquer. With no force too mighty to conquer. We can conquer the disparities that we have in front of us, right? We have to have the right knowledge, the right purpose, the right collection of people, and we all have to be committed to it. We can change it, but we have to be deeply, like profoundly, powerfully connected and invested in making that happen. So, thank you. Have a great rest of the day.